Hello and welcome back to the show. So I'm really excited about my guest for today, Dave Kimbrough, because Dave is a top producing real estate agent based in Mesa County, Colorado, and he actually leads one of the top 100 Remax teams in the entire country and is also the co-founder of Expectation Selling, which is a coaching program for real estate agents to actually be able to balance their life with their business. And Dave is going to be sharing with us a little bit about how that's done and also some of his own backstory on what led him to create this system to better manage client relationships and also have a higher conversion rate and close rate for your clients as a real estate agent as well. So, Dave, welcome to the show, man. Super excited to have you join us here today.
Thanks, Kobe. Appreciate you having me on, man. Look forward to it.
Absolutely. So I've interviewed both of your business partners at Expectation Selling previously on this show. So if you guys haven't checked out those episodes yet, make sure to go back and check them out in the show's previous episodes. But I really have, a lot as far as a better understanding of what it is that you guys teach when it comes to the Expectation Selling coaching program. And I would love to dig a little bit deeper into that here with you today. Before we do that, I would love for you to have an opportunity to share a little bit about yourself and your background and how did you become a real estate agent and really what led you to your success today and also what led you to create the coaching program along with your partners.
Okay. Um, so I kind of took a serendipitous route into real estate, right? So um, back in the early 90s, I was a disc jockey, right? Then I got out of that and I started working in the pharmaceutical industry. So I worked for a company called Eli Lilly, had a great career there, and moved to Grand Junction in 1998, December of 1998, and working in the pharmaceutical industry. And then in 2001, my first wife passed away, and after a battle of cancer. And the guy who was selling our house said, "Hey, dude, you should try getting into real estate." And I thought, well, that's really a terrible idea. Um, because I was going to move back after she passed away. I was going to move back to Atlanta to go to work for another company, a biotech company, be a district manager. And I thought, why would I do that? Right. I mean, like this, I've got a great career path. I was having a really good career. And it just so happened that, I prayed about it, thought about it, and, I just felt peace about it. And I thought I'll give it a try. My buddy back in Atlanta is like, "Hey, you got a year. You can try it for a year and then I can't get you in. Right. Then you're out of the industry altogether." So I thought, yeah, I'll give it a try. So he sold my house, and I mean that was that. I mean, he brought me into real estate, really coached me up as a new real estate agent, and really my career was just right place, right method. I mean, right message, right market, and it just took off, right? So for me, it was I just needed a new gig. Okay, so um, I just needed a new start, and real estate seemed like I felt like I said I felt peaceful about it, and I thought I'll give this a whirl. Life changing event for me, right? Life changing decision.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. And I'm sure a lot of agents who are in the business for a period of time will say that being in real estate is more or less life-changing for them as well because it's a very, it's a very unique industry and what it is that you are trying to do as a professional with your clients and the relationships that you build, especially if you're doing it correctly, which
Right.
you guys touch a lot on in your coaching program. So
Oh.
on that, I would love to, kind of get your take on what was it that really created your success, right? Because you mentioned you got into real estate in the early 2000s, and you've been through market cycles. I'm sure people who are familiar with what happened in kind of the later 2000s will understand. So what was it that really you attribute to your success as an agent? Because you've built now the top Remax team in your entire county and also top 100 in the country. So what was it that really led to that success and the principles behind it?
Well, I mean it's a broad question, but I think the biggest thing was honestly, at first I started out with Craig Proctor. Have you ever heard about Craig Proctor? Yeah, so I got in with the Craig Proctor system. and my business just exploded. And what I found out was it didn't take very long for my life to be completely out of hand. I mean, I was overwhelmed, overstressed, everything. So back up a little bit, I got remarried right about the same time, um, and we ended up having twins. Um, and so I had this new real estate career, and it was just, I mean, booming. Um, and really, what led to it all was I was just overworked, stressed out, um, running around. I know it's cliche, like a chicken with his head cut off. But I mean, I was signing contracts on the hood of my car. I mean, I was selling houses. I mean, this is back in the days before, we had thermal faxes. Remember those? They'd fall off the thing, roll into the thing. And it was just one of those things to where it was unsustainable. And you can sustain it for a while, but once we got to 2000, 2009, 8, 9, 10, and 11, um, it really hit a boiling point because I was carrying upwards of 60 to 70 listings at a time. Very few of those houses were selling. It was just myself and one assistant. Um, and you learn pretty quick that you wake up every day. If you went to bed that night, you woke up the next day and you had no idea what was coming, right? I mean, it was just putting out fire after fire, having hard conversation after hard conversation. And I just realized during that process that this was an unsustainable life for me unless I got more intentional with better systems and better processes in place.
Right. And there's a lot of agents out there who are, in different markets experiencing levels of success that you mentioned that you're experienced as well with 60 plus listings. But a lot of times what they're saying is, you have to sacrifice a lot in order to actually get to that level of success. So that's not something that you went through it, but that's not something that you necessarily felt was sustainable. So
Yeah.
you were able to develop a system in order to continue maintaining your level of production, but not have to sacrifice your mental health, but also your family life as well. Like you mentioned, you had a newer family at the time. So
Yeah.
what were you able to do in order to actually sustain that?
Well, and I think backing up a little bit on that, right, is that, I had been through lost a wife to cancer, right? So fairly life-changing event in and of itself, right? Then changed career paths, another life-changing event, right? Then got married, another life-changing event. Had twins. If you haven't had twins, I suggest you try it because that's a whole nother life-changing event. And then another, my business just took off. So I had all of these compounding life-changing events that were happening. But the one thing I knew is that after going through everything I had gone through, I was not willing to sacrifice my personal life, myself, or my family for my business. But what I also knew was that I was not willing to sacrifice my business either, right? So, the whole, you hear it a lot in the coaching circles, you can't have, work life balance is something that doesn't really exist. You never get perfect balance, right? And I'll agree with that, right? But I don't believe, nor do we believe at Expectation Selling, that you have to sacrifice one to get the other, right? And I'm living proof. In 2021, I did 159 listing sell sides with one assistant, right? And I didn't have anybody. You can look, we got 1,000 5-star reviews. It's not like our customers are, not taken care of, right? So what we had to do back in 2008, 9, 10, 11 was put systems in place to help leverage technology, what even the technology then, but to become better at being able to handle and systemize the business so that we were getting rid of duplicate or time wasting steps in order to maximize our production, maximize our client touch, and maximize our client experience while still maintaining a great work life or home life balance, right? Because I had a couple of twin kids, and I was able to do it, right? I mean, it sounds crazy, but even back in 2018, 2019, 2020, when markets were good before COVID, I was coaching football. I never missed a practice. I never missed games. I never missed swimming. I never missed dinner at home with my family. Rarely, and rarely did I work or do I work nights or weekends. Um, and so you, if you're intentional about what you do, which is part of the reason the expectation selling is, it's about setting expectations, obviously, but it's also about being very intentional about what it is you do, when you do it, how you deliver it, all of these things. If you really set your mind to it, um, it's amazing. It really is amazing.
What you described there sounds like the dream for a lot of real estate agents, right? To have over 100 listings and have that much of, that much production, but still be able to spend time with their family, still be able to coach their kids, sports games, and also be able to, have your weekends and have your own personal time as well. So, and then there's levels of that, right? With expectation selling, I've kind of figured that as well. There's agents that maybe want to do a little bit less and have more
Yeah,
family time and
absolutely. I mean, and part of it too is the expectations, right? About we talk about setting expectations with the expectation selling, but it's not just about setting expectations at work, right? It's about setting expectations at home. It isn't like I don't take phone calls at home, but you know what? My wife and my kids knew exactly what I did for a living, and we all had a deal, right? So it wasn't like I wouldn't answer during dinner. Fine, that was a rule, right? That was kind of the expectation. So we set these things up. It sounds a little crazy, to set these things up so specifically, but when you really are intentional about how you set them up, not only with your family, but you marry that with setting it up with your clients, right? It's an amazing synergistic response that you get that allows for a much higher quality work-life balance than you would get otherwise.
right. So, and I don't think that's, necessarily like a silly thing to have, right? I think that's actually very important to have these very specific rules that you make with yourself, but
Yeah,
also with your family and also your clients. Because if you don't have those standards that you will always commit to, then you're never going to, when things get crazy or out of hand, you're always going to fall to your level of standard, right? For a lot of agents, that's nothing. There's no standard at all. They will take a call anytime, right? And that will add up really quickly and become very, very unsustainable. And that's not necessarily the level of service you want to provide to your clients either. So you're not seeming very professional to your clients in the same in the same breath that you're, also sacrificing your family life. So when it comes to setting the expectations, right, I'm thinking there's a lot of different steps to set, right? You mentioned with your family, you mentioned with your clients. Where does it start? Does it start with I'm assuming it's going to start with yourself. What do you foresee your life as far as how do you foresee that? And then what are the steps to setting the right expectations?
that's actually a really good spin, Kobe. That's a good question. Yeah, I think it is. It had to be with me. I'd lost a wife to cancer. I had a new wife. I had new kids. I had stuff that I valued, right? My personal life was extremely important because I realized that it's your borrowed time, right? I mean, I also realized I was getting into an industry where I could quickly see you could have a high divorce rate, right? It's an extremely high divorce rate in real estate. And I think part of that stuff is because you don't set expectations and everybody's not on the same page. I think there's a lot of unspoken expectations that people have that you just never really just talk about, right? So when my second wife and I got married, we had very specific conversations about how do we want this sounds so goofy, I'm sure, but how do we want our family to be structured? How did we want it to look? How do we want my business to be? What was that gonna look like? So we kind of created that together, right? On what our home was gonna be like. And then I had to take my business and create that around how I wanted my home, because that was the most important piece of it to me, but I wasn't willing to sacrifice my business. So I just had to make my business fit my goal of my home and my family life. And so that's really where so it did start with me. And then it started with my wife and I. My kids, when they got old enough, they were incorporated into it as well. And again, it's all about being intentional with everybody who's involved in the thing because, you don't, one man doesn't row the boat, right? My whole family, my whole team, everybody rows the same boat. But if all the oars are going at different times, it's pretty chaotic, right? So, I mean, really, that's how it is. And then you just, you escalate that up. I mean, you're setting those expectations and how you want that to look and putting your processes and your systems in place to make sure that everybody's rowing on the same count, right? And so really, but that's an interesting, I hadn't really thought about that. How did it start? Who, where did you start with that? And it does. It starts with me, and then, I took it to my family. But I think a lot of times agents have an idea of how this is. Their family may have an idea, but not a total idea of how it's going to work out or how it's going to play out in practice. And that's where you get this disjointed time where, and there were times, right? I mean, there were times where my wife would be like, you really have to answer that call now, right? You really can't make this, or do you really have to miss that thing? And I was just like, I just decided I wasn't going to have that anymore. It was too important.
Right. And you brought up a good point there as well, which is there a lot of times the miscommunication is that other people have unspoken expectations, right? Whether if that's you as the agent with your clients, or maybe it's somebody in your family who has an unspoken expectation of you to show up at certain commitments and to stick with those commitments. Or maybe that's, probably the most that agents experience is the client having unspoken expectations of the agent to be available at certain times and to be, in a way committed to the client and their what problems they're going to be able to solve essentially for them. So what are you guys doing now to make sure all of these unspoken expectations are actually put on the table in, pretty much the first conversation so you can move forward clearly?
Yeah, I mean that really summed it up, right? I mean, you're having the amazing thing about any client, I say it about people in general, right? If you just tell them what to expect, right? They'll eat anything, right? I mean, it really is almost that true. And if they don't want to accept it, then I don't want to work with them because they're not going to fit into my box. My box is pretty big. It's pretty good, but there are certain parameters that have to happen. And what it is it's not just setting the parameter, but it's how you set the parameter, right? So I may have somebody who I think is going to be a really needy client, right? Well, at the listing appointment, I'll tell them, hey, listen, I'm going to give you my cell phone. I don't give everybody my cell phone. And they'll be like, you don't? I'm like, no. And here's why, right? Because I had this client one time who thought that once he got my cell phone, that he had carte blanche to call me anytime he wanted to, right? And they were like, that's unreasonable. I'm like, yeah, I know, right? Like what he really needed was a babysitter. He didn't need a real estate agent. And they're like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah, you don't want a babysitter, do you? And they're like, no, I've just laid out a behavior that they don't want to be associated with. I laid it out in a negative way that they don't want to be associated with it, and they will not be it. Does that make sense?
It
So
does.
just by laying it out that way, you get them to automatically accept it. Whether they really were going to be a problem or not, they're not going to be a problem now, right? They will adhere to the rules because now they got the negative connotation that they don't need to be babysat, or they don't need to bug you or interrupt your life because somebody else did it and it was really uncomfortable and they don't want to be that person, right? So you just, again, it's a conversation that I have at almost every single listing appointment. The only time I ever get myself in trouble is when I forget to have the conversation. And then I get mad and get frustrated, and I have nobody to blame but myself because I know why it happened, right? So that's really it. And there's everything about the process of selling real estate. We have broken this down to where you have conversations, know when to have them, how to present them for different personality types, etc., to make sure that those people will accept it. And I mean, almost always they'll accept it.
That's a really interesting tactic that you guys have when it comes to setting the right expectations up front, right? Because you're painting it in a way where it's almost, having them agree that that's not part of their identity, that being this
Correct.
needy client is not who they are. And if they identify towards that, then you have the freedom to say, I don't want to work with you, I want to walk away. But
Yep.
you're not necessarily saying that in a very kind of untactful manner. You're presenting it in a way where it's really easy for them to accept that and to move away from the type of client that you don't want to work with.
Well, I mean, and yes, further to your point, exactly, you've nailed it. Is if they want to, when you present that story, they have to admit to wanting to need a babysitter, right? What adult is going to say, yeah, I need to be a, you know what I mean? They're not going to, right? It's just one of those things where it's almost impossible for them to identify as that because it just is so far outside of the norm or what they would accept, right?
Yeah.
I often use the same thing too. I tell clients, hey, listen, you can call me if it's an absolute emergency. So like if you're calling me, right, at 8:30 at night, I know it's an emergency. Like there's water running out your front door, right? And I tell them, I said, the only reason I tell you that is because, I want to stay married, right? I love my wife. I want to stay married. Now they know, right, that they're doing it for my benefit, right, of my marriage, even though it's not. My wife's not leaving me, right? She's not gonna. But the perception is he values his family time, and I respect that value, right? And so there's so many ways you can weave that stuff in very casually, laugh about it, talk about it, whatever. That, you know, we always say, and we don't always, we say a lot in expectation selling, we want to be proactive, right? Agents a lot of times love putting out fires, right? You get together with a bunch of your agent friends or whatever, it's something, and everybody's talking about just how crazy busy they are. Do you ever hear that?
All the time. If they don't talk about it, they're not an agent.
It's exactly right. So it's almost like this badge of honor, right? How busy, how out of control can your life be? Because the more out of control it is, that means the busier and more successful you are, right? My deal is I don't want to be a firefighter. I want to be Smokey the Bear, right? I mean, much less sexy, right? For sure, but far more successful. Because if you're putting the fires out before they become fires, you're going to be way out of the game.
Yeah. And it's an interesting point that you just made there because you talk about if you're in a circle of real estate agents, right, and everybody is wearing this busyness as
Yeah.
a badge of honor, right? They say, "Oh, I've been so busy this past week," or "I've been swamped." That's another another great word that a lot of agents use as well as "I've been swamped," and they say it, it's almost like a humble brag, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
I'm really proud of the fact, but I'm not going to make it sound like that. Do you think there's a reason, one of the reasons why agents don't be more proactive and they're wanting to be maybe a little bit more swamped in their day to day because of kind of the industry expectations? How are you seeing the expectations of the entire industry affect the agent's productivity as a whole?
100%, man. Follow the money, right? Follow the money. Anybody who contacts me or contacts you, probably, or any of our listeners, they're selling you something. They're selling you more. They're selling you more leads. They're selling more CRMs. They're selling more website, whatever it is, right? So we're in an industry that's addicted to more, right? You got to have more, 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 more. And we are always like, we don't need more. We just need to do better with what we have, right? So I think the reason people are like that is because the industry, it's an accepted norm. You get into the industry, you see what it is, and quickly thereafter, you'll be verified what it is that you're just going to have a chaotic life. That's the way everybody has it. And so that's what I'm going to have to just deal with. And I was at the point where I was like, no can do. That's not for me, right? But I didn't really have any other choices. I'd stepped out of a really lucrative and really good career to start this new career. So yeah, I think that's exactly what it is because I think that is kind of a culture of our business. There's a hustle culture about our business. And I think that hustle culture of our business is really costly. And so what we really try to focus on is don't get caught up in the hustle culture, right? Do better with what you've got, be intentional with the time you're using. And it's like Mason, he'll tell you all the time. He wants to do, and Mason, for those listeners who didn't listen to this, he's one of our co-creators. He wants to work 15, 20 hours a week, right? And still wants to do, make a couple of hundred grand a year, right? I get that, right? I mean, I'm not. I'll work a lot. I don't mind working a lot within my parameters, but my goal is to sell more, 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 right? I like selling, right? So you can have, it will meet you. This program meets you where you're at, right? And really helps you adapt your systems to become more efficient and better with your time and your time management, your client management. And I think that that's really, it's an important thing that I don't hear too many coaching programs or too many people helping agents with just that.
Right. And it goes back to what you were saying about having more, right, in the industry. And that's where a lot of people will feel like they feel they're not, up to par almost as an agent. And they almost feel bad about setting expectations or parameters around their life because they feel that, after reading hundreds of Facebook posts and talking to other agents in their market or outside of their market, their colleagues, and they'll feel like, all the successful agents, everybody who's doing more production, or at least looks like they're doing more production, are saying, when, I'm taking calls left and right, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. So what you guys are saying, and you can, verify or confirm this for me, is that it doesn't matter, right? You can choose to work less, and there's nobody out there that should really, affect your choosing to do that. You need to be the one to make a decision as far as how much you want to work, if you want to sell more, if you want to sell less.
Yep.
And it's okay if that answer is yet as less.
Yep. 100%. Right. I mean, there's no one size fits all. Right. And so I think that is what it is. And part of the reason we did this thing is because we have agents on our team whose choice of production is high and some that's lower. Right. And so for us, it's really important that what we do meets that work-life balance for that particular agent. And so really, then it really gets down about how good can you be with your systems. Mason's very good with his systems, right? He may be taking a lot of phone calls, but he's not doing repetitive phone calls, right? And so that's where it gets into, we don't, expectation selling is not a lot about scripts and dialogues and overcoming objections. I don't know if you've talked to the others about that stuff, but it's overcoming objections, scripts and dialogues, those are good things to have, but that's reactive selling, right? You are defensively selling. When you're starting to overcome objections, you're defensively now selling, right? Our goal is to teach agents to trust themselves, and because they know, I know when I went to two this morning, two houses. I told both of those sellers probably 90% of the problems that were going to lie ahead, right? That's what we're doing, is getting ahead of it. Now they know about it. They'll process it. They'll deal with it. There's all these things. You don't have to belabor the point. But when you point out, hey, listen, how old's your roof? Oh, 27 years. Okay, that's good. That's good. Just know inspectors are on roofs right now, like what, like chicken on a June bug, right? I don't have to say anything else. So when the inspection shows up, dude has already processed that he may have a roof issue, right? It's not like I'm springing him on a Saturday afternoon. So when the inspection shows up, he's prepared. I know it sounds goofy, but I guarantee you he's prepared. He may not like it, but he knew it might show up. And that is the key, being proactive. And as an agent, we all know you have to trust yourself that you know the process better than your clients, and you have to trust that they are looking for somebody to be honest and genuine with them from the get go.
Yeah, and as an agent, you should know the process better than your clients, hopefully, right?
You better. Yeah, you better. And you do, but a lot of agents just don't want to say because they're people pleasers,
Mm.
right? They don't want to get to the listing appointment, say something about the roof, and them not hire them because of the roof,
And
right?
that's the thing. I think that's such a flaw, but everybody struggles with it to some extent, is that you know better. You
Yep,
know that what your client's saying is not right, and you've been through hundreds of transactions in your career to validate that as a
yep,
fact. But
yep,
when they say something and they're just because maybe they sound confident, or the client is just very pushy in one direction or another, the agent will just kind of agree and just be agreeable and go along with that, and end up causing issues down the line because they've, haven't set the proper expectations. Do you see a lot of that in the industry? I'm sure from your coaching and other agents
yeah,
as well. Just want to please people.
100%. One of the guys I was with this morning, he said, I'll tell you what, I'm a stubborn seller. He's like, I know all this closing cost stuff. I had an offer last year with $10,000 in closing costs. He's like, I'm not going to do that. Right. I said, okay, that's totally fine. You don't have to do that, but just free advice. Right. This is exactly what I told him. I said, free advice. Whether you hire me or you hire somebody else, just know there's about an 80% chance you're going to see that again. So you've got to decide whether you want to be the stubborn seller who doesn't sell or the understanding stubborn seller who sells. Choice is yours. I'm good with it. I just want to let you know. I mean, just it completely um, took it off the table. He's like, no, I get that. I get that. You just have to reframe what it is when they say it. You know what I mean? To where it makes it digestible. You're not challenging them. You're just letting them know, here it's coming again. It's all good. Just know it. And you can either keep your eye on the prize or you can choose to be stubborn and sit on a house that's sitting empty while you're in, Minnesota, right? Most of the time, they'll choose not to sit on the house while they live in Minnesota, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
you don't even have to strong arm. It's not a strong arm. It's just like, hey, here's what's coming, bud.
Yeah. Yeah, and
So,
I think that's the mindset you have to take, right? You're not trying to, like you said, you're not trying to strong arm somebody into agreeing with you or doing things a certain way. It's literally like goes back to the word, right? And you guys, I think, named this coaching program so well, the expectation, right? It's just this is what's coming, and if you're okay with it, great. If you're not, then you have to adjust your expectations, and maybe I'm not the right agent for you.
well, yeah, you can never be afraid to walk away, right? I mean, you just can't be afraid to walk away. And, we call it the takeaway, right? I mean, but if you do the takeaway, you got to be prepared to do the takeaway. But in an instance like that guy, it's given him two choices, either of which I can live with. Now that I know who I'm dealing with, I can live with it. If he wants to turn down the offer, that's fine by me, right? That's one choice I gave him, which he doesn't want to do, or he'll accept the offer, which I'm also going to be okay with. You know what I mean? Either one of those choices I can live with, and so can he. And so, really, when you lay it out like that and give them two choices, either of which you can live with, it works out amazingly well. That they'll generally choose one of the two.
Yep. I love the way you've kind of set that and painted that picture as well. Because usually when you're proactive about something, you can't control necessarily the results, right? You can't force somebody to be accepting of a certain
Right.
aspect or not. But there's usually two choices, right? They're either going to accept it or they're not. And if you can live with it and they can live with it, either one, then that's how you come to a solution. And it starts with painting the picture and putting the issue on the table instead of trying to avoid it.
Yeah. When you give them the two choices, either of which those choices I can live with, you just paint the picture. You can not accept the closing costs and not sell, or we know they're coming. You can accept the closing costs and we can get this thing closed. I mean, they turn around pretty quick generally, you know. So there's a lot of different techniques and tactics you can use on that. Jan may or may not have told you, her husband is a therapist, right? So we spend a lot of time talking about, oh, I got this problem. How would I do this? And be like, oh, here's a great way you can do these, present it this way or that way. So a lot of what we've done too has some, kind of therapy roots um, into what we do, because it's really just framing stuff for people how they can accept it and meet the mold that you're trying to create, you know? So,
Exactly. And just to pivot a little bit here, and this is something
yeah,
I know before the show we kind of talked a little bit about as well. So you guys, obviously lead a team of agents
yeah,
as well. So a lot of agents make that transition, right, between going from an individual real estate agent who's producing, maybe they have one assistant or a couple employees employed as, assistants, and then they go move into being a team leader role. And if they've had the bad habits of not setting expectations with clients, they have the same bad habits of not setting the right expectations with the agents that they're bringing onto their team as well. And then it's really hard for them because a lot of times they're staying in production themselves, but they're also having to show up as the leaders of their team. So that's another business, another aspect of the business. And then
right.
everything else in their family life and home life stays the same as well. So where has that transition that you've seen for agents going from an individual to a team leader that has been a big struggle for them? And how does expectation setting come in to play when it comes to bringing other agents into your team and making sure that you support them, but also not letting them run amok on your life as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty similar, really. I mean, how you treat an incoming agent with how you treat, I mean, it's a little bit different because you've got to make a few more. If they're writing a contract at 8 o'clock and they need help or whatever, I mean, that's a different ball game, right? I mean, you got to be available for that stuff. But I think we all really value the people we bring in, value personal life, right? They're very respectful of that, yet they also have a want to do high volume business, right? So, I mean, I think it's really just trying to master, and it's tough. I mean, it gets tougher, right? When you're trying to set expectations on all these different levels, you have to keep them pretty consistent. So, pardon me, a lot of the expectations we have for our clients are the same as they are for our teammates, right? And the same for me too, right? I mean, a lot of times agents have a hard time, if I call them or I want something, how do I set the expectation with him, right? Um, it's pretty easy really with me because I value that so highly that before I ask or I do or I want or whatever, we usually are pretty mindful of what they may or may not be going through.
Right.
So, we try to be respectful of that as well on the backside.
Yeah, and that's the other part of that as well. Is it's more of a two-way kind of relationship, right, with agents on your team because they have, I'm sure, expectations of you as a leader, but you also have expectations for them, right, in order to bring them in and give them the value that you give to them. So, is there a different dynamic there when you're setting the expectations as far as like this is what I expect from you, this is what you can expect from me, and then these are the things that are you know, out of my realm of support for you, and this is what you would have to figure out on your own that I don't do, and they have to be okay with that.
Oh man, I mean, as a team leader, there's not much outside of the realm of what I would, yeah, you know what I mean? I mean, it's like, yeah, you counsel, personal and family and business and all. I mean, you just end up doing it all, right? I mean, that's just kind of how it goes. So, you know, no, I don't think so. I mean, I think you're kind of as a team leader, when you have other people that work for you or that are working on your team, I've got responsibility to listen to what they need or try to help coach them through or work with them or whatever. And I don't know if I'm answering your question exactly, but regardless of what it is, that's part of my role when people work with you. You know what I mean? My role is to sit and listen if you got, kid problems, family problems, parent problem, whatever it is, right? And to try to help them through that. I mean, there are times when I'm like, okay, no, you need a counselor. You need somebody else. But I think we really try to, you know, if they have expectations of how we can help them, we try to live up to those.
Right. Yeah. So that's the big, I think, difference I see between being an individual agent and being a team leader as well. So because you have other people kind of depending on you or expecting you to show up as the leader, you take on just therefore more responsibility at that point from a leadership position. Obviously, get the rewards from that as well, but taking on that additional responsibility as a team leader, it's a little bit different. Actually, it's for some people it's a lot different than being an individual agent where you're just working with the client on that, kind of transaction basis and potential referrals down the line.
And it's hard, right? I mean, it's hard. It's hard when I'm juggling my business, also juggling the marketing, team this, team that, team, all the stuff that you end up juggling with that. It does get tough, right? It's a challenge. And I would love to say that we started expectation selling and I'm perfect. I'm not, right? You can call any of my teammates, my wife, my kids, whatever. They'll tell you he ain't perfect. But they will also tell you he's nonstop effort of trying to be perfect, right? So, but I make mistakes, and I could do a better job of listening. Sometimes I could do a better job of a lot of stuff. But that's part of the beauty of this business, part of the beauty of just life in general, man. You never stop trying to improve,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. And I love that idea as well because nobody's going to be perfect, right? Whether they go through the coaching program or, go
No,
through a different coaching program, you're not going to get it 100% of the time, but it's an effort to continue improving and to continue setting the correct standards and living up to those standards as well. And it's always in the back of your mind, and that's how you improve and get better and produce more, but continue to have the right systems in place in order to maintain your family life as well.
well, how boring would life be if we were perfect, right? I mean, that's just part of it. That's part of the game, and that's part of it. And I think all of us understand, and even my clients, I'll tell them all the time, hey, listen, I'll make mistakes, right? And I'll tell them you can call my wife. She'll tell you I make mistakes, right? They love that when I say that, right? They never call my wife, but they get it. And I mean, that right there in and of itself diffuses a lot of circumstances down the road by saying, hey, I'm not perfect. I'm going to work my butt off to be perfect. I'm going to do as good as I can do, I promise you. And I do the same thing with our team. I do the same thing with our staff. I do the same thing with my main broker. But ultimately, part of this stuff is we're all just living and learning. Doesn't matter how long we've been in the business, you're still living and learning. It's the only, this job is amazing because you get up every day and you learn something new. Almost every single day, you learn something new, right?
Exactly. Well, Dave, man, I want to appreciate you for taking some time and being on the show today. I really enjoyed our conversation. Actually, I enjoyed all of our conversations I've had with you and Jan and Mason as well. I think what you guys are coaching agents on is a very important aspect to maintain their production or even increase it, but also have a sanity, if you will, in order to maintain their family life as well. So props to you guys. Really, I'm really glad I had to have the conversation with all three of you. So for anybody out there who is watching or listening to this that want to learn a little bit more about what you guys do, what are some of the best places for them to find you or to find out more about expectation selling?
Easiest thing is www.expectationselling.com. Go there. The course is there. This isn't a course where you get upsold. This isn't a course for all this stuff. Everything we have to offer is right there on the course, right? So you can go check that out. You can go to at expectation selling to any of our social media channels, any of that stuff, and you can follow us there. And I mean, really, truthfully, it's for those people who are looking for a mindset shift to being proactive in their approach at life and at selling and have those things marry with an amazing work-life balance. It's a totally achievable, dude. So achievable.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much. And we'll make sure to leave the links to your website in the description, the show notes down below. So, guys, go check out expectationselling.com if you guys want to learn a little bit more about the program and what Dave does. And other than that, man, appreciate you being here. Is there any last piece of advice, any last tips you want to leave with the audience?
No, man, it's just, I mean, yeah, the only thing I would say is don't believe everything you hear and don't buy into what everybody sells, right? Whether you do expectation selling or not or whatever, um, work-life balance is absolutely achievable in this industry and providing not only work-life balance for yourself and your family, but amazing experiences for your clients. Our clients have amazing experiences with us. And really that is the goal. And when you can get that stuff, and like I said, never be perfect, but if that's your goal, this can do great things for your business.
Yep, absolutely, man. That's some great advice. Thanks so much again for being here. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next show. Take
Thank
care.
you, Kobe. Yep.